Welcome to another evening of data science.
It's not showing on the YouTube.
Pardon?
YouTube.
Yes, but
Okay.
Emmanuel will do that, oh?
It's coming now.
Can we start?
Yes.
So you can start.
Good evening once again. It's another night of data science. We are going to continue our series on data the visual way. So tonight we'll be focusing on visualizing using spreadsheets. Once again, I'm your fancy airware technology loving foodie, as I put it. The CEO of Atwa Tech and the principal lead of Odikro. Who are you? You might be an activist who wants to use visualizations to make a strong case. You might be a blogger or a journalist who wants to tell a story using data. You might be a coder who wants to build an app to make sense out of, add value to some data that is sitting. You might be an enthusiast who wants to just share their passion by finding insights in data. You might be a decision maker who also wants to look at trends in data. So today we'll do a quick recap of what we did last 2 weeks, and then we'll dive into visualizing with spreadsheets. So last week we looked at data visualization. A couple of weeks ago we looked at data visualization, and we saw that data visualization allows us to visually display or represent information or data to reinforce the human mind, the human cognition. So you are able to look at shapes and digits and letters all put together in a certain way to ensure that you understand what you are presenting. And so the visual attributes is the fundamental principle of data visualization. It also simply is the process of converting raw data into easily understood pictures of information. And so if you want to take a decision, or if you want to consume that information, it's faster for the person, the receiving party. It also accelerates the identification of relationships, hidden patterns, and help you discover meanings in data. So if you look at some of the data visualization examples that we looked at last week, you notice that all of them, whether telling some story or you're able to see some relationships, or able to identify or discover hidden patterns here and there. As I've already said earlier, it is something that allows the human mind to consume what is being put out there. So basically, those are the areas we looked at. We also said it could be static, it could be animated and interactive. And then we looked at chat suggestions, where and when you use certain type of chats. So for relationships, we said you could use a scatter chart or a bubble chart. For distribution, we said you're looking at a single variable, so you could use a column histogram, a line histogram. Again, you could also, if you are doing two variables, you could then use a scatter chart when you are doing distribution. If you are doing three variables, it will be good for you to use a 3D area chart. If you are doing composition, it means that you are looking at data that changed over time. So you are working with timelines, either many periods or a few periods. So you could go with a stacked column chart if only relative differences matter. If relative and absolute differences matter, you could look at stacked column charts as well. You can also look at stacked area charts if you are only looking at data that has only relative differences. If you're looking at relative and absolute differences, you can also look at stacked area chart. If you are looking at static data, you can simply use a pie chart or some waterfall chart. You can also use a stacked column chart with subcomponents if you are looking at static data. If you were also doing comparison, especially with two variables, we can go with a bar chart. If it's many items, you can go with a column chart. It's a few items. If you have a lot of categories, you can actually go with a table and embed the charts in there. If you are looking at, you can look at a variable with column chart also for two variables. If you're looking at that, if you're looking at a comparison over time, you can also look at use a cyclical circular area chart. You can, if it's not cyclical data, you can also use a line chart. And so you should bear in mind that once you identified what sort of data you are analyzing or you're visualizing, whether you're looking at focusing on relationships or comparisons or composition or distribution, you choose the right type of chart for it. Again, visualizations are not just limited to charts. You can do infographics if it matters or if it's the best option for what you're trying to portray. We also looked at bad visualizations and good visualizations, and we picked the spreadsheet as an example. And the example I gave outlined sales from 1999 to 2003, which were marginally small, the differences. But if you went with a chart where the y-axis is using the sales amount and not some absolute amounts, then what it will show is that it will show a big increase in sales. Meanwhile, the change is not that big. So if you look at this visualization, you notice that once we went to absolute figures like 0, 500, 1,000, 1,005, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, you notice that the change was pretty small. So in between 1999 to 2003, the changes are not so drastic. Yeah, very small margins. So it's very important that when you are doing visualizations, especially if you are doing charts like this, you ensure that you have the right type of chart, and even in terms of your y and x axis, you have it right. Okay, so today we are visualizing using spreadsheets. Now, spreadsheets happen to be something that is common to all of us because most of us either would use Excel to crunch some numbers, or Google Sheets, or even LibreOffice, or numbers if you're a Mac person. So you have spreadsheets everywhere you turn. And the first step to visualizing data in a graphical form is typically for you to determine what type of technique which is best for the data. And so we are going to look at some data sets. I hope that it works out. We'll look at some election data and we'll look at others. So let's try and do something with a bar chart for a start. Okay, so we are going to look at the creation of jobs by government, from jobs created by the government from January 2017 to March 2018. Let's just pick Ministry of Interior. So we'll pick from the police service to the immigration service. We just pick this. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so we have this data that shows the number of people that have been recruited in the police service, in the prison service, and the fire service, including an immigration service as well. I hope everyone can see this. So it's fairly straightforward. So you are doing bar charts. You are looking at a summary of this table, and so bar charts use horizontal x-axis and vertical y-axis to plot categorical data or longitudinal data. Bar charts compare or rank variables by grouping the data by bars, and the length of the bars are proportional to the values in the group represents. So bar charts can be plotted vertically or horizontally. In the vertical column, the categories are compared on the horizontal axis, and then on the horizontal, the categories are compared on what is on the vertical axis. So we'll just do this. I've highlighted everything here. Just take this off. So I go to insert, and then I say charts. I can decide to go to recommended charts, which will then point out what sort of charts it gives me. So the recommended charts gives me this, and so I can look at a clustered bar chart, or I can look at a pie chart, but we are looking at bar charts right now. So again, if you notice, based on what I explained in terms of the y-axis, we have absolute numbers on the side, which would present us the proper changes we want to look at. If I just went with 500, 2000, then you won't see the sort of changes that is available. So as I explained, your y-axis, usually if you went with your numbers there, you have to go with absolute numbers. And so, yes, let's look at this. Okay, so this is simply showing the jobs that have been created by this current government from when they took power in January 2017 till March 2018. So they've created 2,000 jobs in the police service. They've created 500 jobs in the prison service. They've created another 500 in the fire service and another 500 in the immigration service. And it's very important that you always have your title of your chart. So jobs created in the jobs creation in the security services. Maybe Jan 17 to we can do an insert, and we can do another insert down here, and then we'll put that. So we can also decide to play around with the fill. We can have a solid fill of nope. So we can decide to play around with this. We can play around with the colors of the chart itself. We can decide to also use some of these styles that are present. So this is the standard one we've gone with, but you can decide to play around with some of them. are not appropriate, but you can decide to do this and that. So basically, this is a pie chart, and it's easy to compare the values this way. We can again decide to do a vertical. If the same data, we can decide to insert, and this time around, if we went bar chart, you can decide to do a horizontal bar chart, which is another option. So it's a clustered bar chart, but it's horizontal and it's 2D. If we want to do 3D, we can decide to do that. So when you are doing horizontal, like I said, the Y, the vertical column will be comparing which the vertical column, which is the y-axis, will be comparing to the x-axis, and vice versa, depending on the option you choose. So let's move on to a different type of chart. David, if there are any questions, you can push so I take them whilst I go through. You can hear me. Okay, so you can also decide to do stack bar charts. They are usually useful when you are summing all values, especially if you are looking at individual categories and groups. So it's important for you to look at what you are doing and choose what sort of charts that you are using. So if you decide to go with stacked bar charts, it's okay. So we can look at a different data set, and then this time we'll use pie charts. So let's look at electricity data. Let's look at expenditure allocation for the government. So we can look at from the economic perspective. So we look at Ministry of Food and Agri, we look at lands and natural resources. Then we look at trade and industry. We look at tourism, we look at energy, and then we look at MESTI, Ministry of Environment, Science and Technology. So we can look at that now. So here, this is our data set. Okay, so the total is 256,259,926. Okay, so you're going to create pie charts. Pie charts are useful for cross-sectional visualization. So if you are viewing a snapshot of categories, so for instance, the data set I showed you, if we decide to go with a major subtotals like economics, infrastructure, social administration. In fact, we should do that. Let's do that rather. That way, everybody will appreciate the data sets better. Okay, so I'm going to write this, write this. Okay. Okay. So, like I said, if you are looking at categories of at a single point in time where you want to look at a snapshot of categories, your best option is your pie chart. You're able to look at slices that illustrate the numerical proportions of a whole, and so typically out of 100%. And this data then can be measured once. And so one challenge with pie charts is the ability to compare numerical values of each group. And so that's why I said, if we go with this, again, I just picked this and then that's it. Fairly straightforward. So who is the highest? So when I double click here, so government, let's title it government expenditure. So I just did this and I said we should add the data labels. So it gives me a fair idea of the amount here. And then the color legends also give, but I can decide that I know 4 million is MMDAs. So I can decide that I rather want to see MMDAs. I can also decide that this is economic. Infrastructure. Okay, so I just move them out. So clearly, this points out that this visualization emphasizes the relative use of our funds as a country, and so you can see where a lot of the funds are going to. Very little is going to economic activities. A lot of it going to MDAs, and then very small going to infrastructure, public safety. So not so much administration, much more. So I'm sure we are spending more on administration than anything else, though this will not be conclusive because it's not drilled down unless we look at the data from this perspective where it even only shows the ministry. So if you pick administration, how much is going to office of the government machinery? About 300 under administration, about 375 million is going there. How much is going to audit service? 32 million. How much is going to public services commission? 1 million. District assemblies common fund, which actually does a lot of the development, has a pitiful 232,000. And so But this is for the year 2012. This data set, let me state for the year 2012. I have for 2013 as well. So let's look at another type of visualization, which is histogram. And histograms are usually a graphical representation of a distribution or a frequency of numerical data. We often use that to show different values which occur in a quantitative or continuous data set. Histograms allows you to group data into bins or ranges to show the distribution or the frequency of each value. And so let's see. Let's see which data set we work with. No. Okay, so we are going to look at our R&D spending from 1981 to 1990 in the agri sector. I hope you are all following. I hope I'm not moving too fast. Okay, so again, we can also in with the trends that we are looking at, we can also use line charts for this or line graphs. And line graphs are also a type of a visualization option that uses the X and Y axis to map quantitative data. Just like I said, the histogram allows you to map, or should I say, distribute the frequency of numerical data. And so you are looking at the value, how each different value occurs in a continuous data. So we can look at, let me just talk about these two options so that we'll try both of them for everybody to see. And so in your line graph, you're looking at quantitative, independent, or dependent variables, just like scatter plots too. It also gives an option of looking at individual data points. And so your line graph can connect to each data point and together connect to determine the local change from one point to the next one. And it helps you to display the time series relationships by tracking the changes in a continuous way. And so equal intervals of time in between. So like this data set that we are looking at obviously is on an annual note. So it gives a fair idea of the differences. So let's look at that. Okay, so we can use our line chart as I talked about. And so this clearly shows you what our spending has been when it comes to agric. So how much are we spending on the public sector? How much are we spending government, higher education? And that is spelled out. And so you can look at the changes over the years from 1981 to 1990. The percentages are quite low, but yes, it's the country we live in. And so you can look at different options of charts that the spreadsheet presents, but let's go back to this. The other option I talked about was using, so you can use this layout as well. That will mean that this time around you're looking at the percentages in a different way. Whereas, but again, if you were to analyze your year by this, it won't make sense as compared to if your year was on the y-axis, or if your percentages was on the y-axis. I hope I'm clear. So we can try combo charts, but it's not appropriate for the data that we are looking at. So scatter plots can also work, or line with markers, which then points out the data points as well. Okay, so another reason why we use line graphs for visualizations is because it allows us for quick assessment of the acceleration. So the line is curving upwards or downwards, and so if it's decelerating, you are able to see when it's going downwards, and you're able to see the volatility in terms of the frequency. And so line graphs allows you to show and compare several groups of variables over the same metric over time to see whether there any correlation in the trends. Okay. I mentioned scatter plots earlier, and so let me just talk about it. So scatter plots uses the x and y axis to plot quantitative independent variables in order to visualize the correlation between the two variables. Okay. And so we're going to try and pick some data that has two particular variables. So maybe we just use election data to do that. So unlike other charts that we use, scatter plots have the ability to show trends, clusters, patterns, relationships. And so if you notice a lot of, even though I don't see a lot of Ghanaian visualizations using scatter plots, it's very dynamic. The scatter plot option of visualizations is very dynamic because of the ability to depict the relationships that you're looking at. Let's see if we can find some skirt and blouse business. Election data. Okay. 2016, 20. No, okay. I'm going to just filter. Let's just filter to pick only John Mahama and Nanado. And let's filter just one region as well. So let's just do Volta.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a question here.
Okay.
So let's assume we want to make predictions of our group attending in the next 5 years.
You want to do what?
How best can we use Excel, please?
If they want to do what?
If we want to do predictions of our group spending in the next 5 years.
Okay, so you can. One option is to use the scatter plot. The other option will be to use the line graphs. And the reason why you use a scatter plot or a line graph is because it gives you the ability to identify the trends, because the distribution points are clear, and so you're able to see the trends of what you are trying to achieve, and you're able to see the patterns easier if you use a line or a scatter plot. So you can clearly see that this was the figure at this point, and this was it. So this is the difference. Probably if it was a 2% increase or decrease, this is what will happen in the next few years. We can decide. Pardon?
You're going to extrapolate then?
Yes. Am I clear?
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
No, not for now.
Okay.
Can we move into some of the results, because we are left with 18 minutes? Do you have
unfortunately, so what sort of results? Unfortunately, I was just looking at us trying to create them one by one. So I guess.
No, a result of some of this, you've shown us how to prepare it in Excel. Can you show some of the results already prepared?
That's what I'm saying. What I had done was to have a number of data sets that we can just look at. So it was just for us to all go through and see us create the rather than bring ones that I had already prepared. But I can show some from last week and then explain from it if you want.
Yeah.
Else I can also
be able to exhaust the visualization if we want to complete all these ones.
Okay. So let me talk about trend line or regression line at least before anything else.
Yeah.
Just to close up on that. So trend lines help visualize correlations between variables, and a regression line could be added, and it helps calculate the best fit line through the data point. So there are many trend options. So that we are looking at a linear one, exponential, polynomial, power, or even a moving average. So the regression lines can help us interpolate or extrapolate data sets for predicting values outside the observed data. So this is an addition to the question that David, the person asked. So in addition to adding a regression line, you're able to look at the statistical measure of how close the observed data is fitted to the regression line. And it helps you indicate, or it helps you explain the variability around the data. Okay. Hello?
Yeah, we are here.
So yes, so that was about at least the trend line. I wanted to talk about that. That way people also understand. But using spreadsheets to create visualizations are quite straightforward. It's not difficult. The only thing is to pick the right option of a chart. Make sure it's well laid out. Make sure the descriptions are right. Make sure you've quoted the source. Make sure your X and Y axes are done properly. It's fairly straightforward. You're able to add that to your reports. You're able to just use that to put that on a presentation. You're able to use that to tell a story one way or the other. And so this is maybe, I think that will be it for using Excel or Google Sheet or numbers if you are using a Mac to create.
So there's another question here.
Okay.
In performing and comparison analysis of data, which of the analytical tools should one use?
Okay.
In performing and comparison analysis of data, which of the analytical methods should one use?
Okay. So in comparison, it depends on what you are comparing. You might either be comparing things over time or a number of items. And so let's say we're picking time. If you're picking time, you are either doing a lot of periods or you're doing few periods. So as I said earlier, if you're doing many periods, then you can go with a cyclical or a circular area chart. Or you can go with a line chart if you are doing, and so if you see my chart from 1981 to 1990, I went with a line chart because the periods were quite many. Now, if you have very few periods, you can either go with a column chart or again go with a line chart. If you are comparing a number of items and the items are few, you can go with a column chart. If there are many items, you can go with a bar chart. If you have items but many categories, you can then have a table and embed the charts in them. Or you can go with a variable with column chart, and that should work for you, especially if you are looking at 2 variables per item. So if you are doing comparison, those are your best options for comparison. If you are doing distribution or relationship or composition, then the options changes. Then you can look at other options. David. So I hope I've answered the question. Hello, David.
I'm here.
Okay. So I said that I was done with that question.
That's right. That's okay. It's understood. My question is, which other tool can be used for data visualization apart from the Excel?
Okay, so so in in the other sessions, we also look at templating tools. Okay, I took Excel today. I was thinking in another session we'll use a picture chart of Engage or any of the other tools like Infogram, and then we'll look at that one. I'll pre-design some of the charts, and then we'll also try and do some of them in the session. So there are other tools to do that, but like I said, it depends on what you are trying to do. There are tons of tools to do data visual, and then in another session we can look at using coding to create visualization. So we can then do R or or any other language we decide to do. So in our subsequent sessions, we can look at creating visualizations programmatically, and then we can also look at tools that are more of templating tools. So you either create your own template or you use an existing template to create the visualization. There are quite a number of tools like that.
Okay.
Yes. So I hope I answered your question, but the tools I went through them last week, unless you want me to touch on all of
Yes,
them.
please do. Summarize that one, because last week a lot of people were not here.
Okay. So just give me a minute. So last week I said that there were a number of tools that we can use to visualize data. And so the first one I touched on was the spreadsheet applications. I mean, Excel, Google, Open Office. Then I also touched on Google Fusion Tables, which is another option. There's Flot charts, FLOT charts. There's Tableau. I think that's one of Emmanuel's favorites. Tableau is pretty cool to use. There's Visme.
We don't have it on the screen.
Okay. I have to transfer. Just give me a minute.
All right.
Okay. Sorry, let me just. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Wait.
Okay,
No,
so
yeah, it's coming now.
okay, so
No,
I
not yet.
mentioned.
We see your image. You need to check. Yeah, it's back now.
Okay, so Excel, Google, Open. We've all looked at that. One
Can
of
you
my
put
favorites here.
put
One
it
of my
in the
favorites here. Pardon?
put it in PPT form so that the screen will be bigger?
It's in PPT.
I mean the slide form, slide presentation form.
Like this. This way.
Go down and click on yeah.
Okay, so some of the tools are paid tools. So if you were using one like Power BI, you have to pay for it. If you are using ClickView, I think there's a free version, but it's limited. Now, one of my favorite here is Data Wrapper, and I happen to have met the guy who built it when he started out. It was free. Most of it, almost the entire thing was free until, I mean, the number of users increased, and so. But it's a very cool tool to use. You can actually import your data in various forms, and again, it will start the process of even giving you the option of choosing which chart you want. You can create your own type of chart or a template, and so it's quite easy to use. There's Infogram, which is also really simple to use. There's easily. This one is also quite easy to use. PictoChart is another one which is quite easy to use, and so you can use that to do. And the good thing about some of these tools is that, especially PictoChart, it doesn't limit you to just creating the charts, but it allows you to create an infographic. So your visualization, if you were your end product of your visualization was an infographic, you can do that from PictoChart and just embed that your chart inside the infographic. Google Charts as well is a good option. I mentioned Tableau earlier. Then we can programmatically do some JS with D3 and chat.js. We can do Ember charts. We can do Jupyter, which is R. We can also use Silk. We can use Timeline, chat blocks, Vanguard, I mentioned earlier, Canva. Some of these tools also have options. So now they have options on your mobile phone. So you can, once you have your data set anywhere you are, you can actually create your visualizations on there. If your visualization does not even need a lot of data and it was just an infographic, you can quickly create it on your mobile device and start sharing straight away. So these are some of the tools that you can use.
Okay.
And so in our subsequent I think I'll have 2 more sessions on visualization. The next one we'll look at a tool that is more. We'll look at some of the tools that allows you to template, and then we'll move on to writing some code to create visualizations. So I think, but those who want to go deeper can also decide to join our Python class, which also help them programmatically create visualizations. So thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any more questions, I can answer them. Else we'll call it a night.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for us? Yeah. Can you put a PPT on slideshow? That was what I was trying to ask, but I think that place is graded out, right?
It's so.
Never mind. Can you put your slides?
At the bottom of the name,
Yeah.
bottom right.
Where? It's
Bottom right, presentation mode. We want the slide to,
oh, okay.
we want to be in presentation mode so that they can see the writing.
Okay, hang on. Oh no.
Looks like it's graded out, huh? Anyway.
You can right click and see present. When you
Yeah.
right click and see present, you should take as a.
Yes, yeah, presenter view. But this is not what you want to see, is it?
Normally, if you put the presentation mode, the whole screen
We
is.
want it to be in present mode. Yes, it fills up the screen so we can see the slide better. But it's okay.
Okay. So this.
Right.
No, not this.
No, not this. Yeah, this one.
This one?
The first one. The first one.
This one?
Yeah. Current slide. Two to the left. 2 to the left. Oh.
But this is what we had earlier.
Yes.
Yeah, but it needs to be in a presentation format. Then.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I think it's difficult to get it into presentation.
Yeah, we can share this and we can share this under the video.
Maybe it's in the browser.
Can we share this under the video as comments or something? The tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can do that. That would be
yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right. If any questions, if there are no questions, we will meet next 2 weeks to continue.
Thank you very much, Neema.
Yeah, the webinar cannot explain everything into details. It's just to give an overview so that those who are interested can join our data science community, and those who are interested in developing their skills can get in touch, and we can take you through the training.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all for spending time with us, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Cheers.
Yeah.
Are we off live?